Hi, this is Lorraine Watry, and this is Watercolor Techniques for Beginners, Part 2 of 4. And this is actually a remake of my watercolor techniques and hopefully new and improved. And I finished the last video with the dry brush technique. And before I move on, I noticed that in the drop color on wet color, that there was an area that I could show you how to lift color when it starts to pool too much. And so I need to wet my brush, and then I dab it on my paper towel, and then just by touching that area, not really painting it, but just coming in and touching very carefully around the bottom of that painted area, I can lift some of that color back out, and that will help to keep that area from having too dark of a bottom edge, or possibly having that color back up into an area and cause a bloom later on. So next I'm going to show you the scumbling technique, and scumbling is great for doing things like foliage, bushes, just kind of a background texture. And I'm going to get some paint out. I'm just kind of moving my brush in a random way. I'm not trying to make any specific shape, and I can change my color as I move along. I think I started sort of a green-blue, and now I'm more into the greens. I think I added a little bit of a quinacridone magenta in that area, so it can have some variation and changes within that area. But scumbling is a great way to put on some color and have it look varied, and both in color and shape. Okay, now we're going to do pushing out pigment, and I have been painting with a round brush, and the round brush that I use is a Cheap Joe's number 38 round brush, and it gets a great point to it, and it holds a lot of paint. And Cheap Joe's is an online art supply company that you can purchase brushes and paint and paper from. And then for this area, I'm going to use a flat brush. And the flat brush is just the way the bristles are on it. It just makes it easy to do this technique. So I'm getting my brush wet, and I'm going to take my brush, and I want to turn it so that I'm actually almost basically painting upside down, and then lift. And that's that. So I'm using the motion of lifting to create sort of a grassy-like texture at the end of that. The next technique is wipe out, and I can use both a brush, and I could use a Kleenex or a paper towel. And I'm going to put some blue color on there because this is a great thing to use for skies. So that's cobalt blue, and I'm just painting it on. And then while it's still wet, I'm going to take my paper towel, and my paper towel was slightly damp. I could use a Kleenex though to do that same thing. And it's a really quick and easy way to make clouds or to lift color off of something while it's still wet. Now some of that color might want to push back a little bit, so your shape that you initially pull off will get smaller. You can see with the brush, and the brush that I'm using is damp, so I put water on it and then I dry it on my paper towel, and then I go and lift color off. But you can see that that shape that I make, the paint wants to move back into that slightly damp area. So if you want to make a wider section, then you may have to go a little wider than what you want that area to be. The detail painting technique area is a way to learn what your brushes can do. It's something that I will use possibly these different movements of my brush in order to do the detail or the finishing touches on a painting. So you can just try your brushes in that area, try to move them around in a different way. So for instance, I can start on the tip of my flat brush and then turn it back. And so you can see how you can do different shapes and things with your brushes. And then you can, with my larger brush, I can go from a high up on the tip to a wider area by pressing down on the brush. And that is a brush that you can use that's great for making tree branches, and it's a liner brush. So I'm getting some color, and because it's got a bristle, the hairs that are real long, it tends to want to bend and move, so you can make really nice thin strokes with it. Kind of a calligraphic feel to it. So now we're going to go to the masking fluid area, and my masking fluid is dry. It will feel a little sticky, but it will look a little shiny. Kind of depends on what masking fluid you're using, also what brand. So now that it's dry, I'm going to take some watercolor, and I'm painting around the masking tape first. And then I'm going to get some color and paint around the masking fluid. And both will act as a way to keep the paint from painting the paper in that area. And then I can go back later, once those are dry, and remove the mask, either the tape or the masking fluid. And I can paint in that area, or I can soften them or clean them up. Now, one thing about masking fluid, the area on the left, is that a lot of times it will look kind of harsh or not integrated into the painting, so you may need to go back and clean up your edges, maybe soften some edges, and you need to be really careful about leaving the mask on your paper for more than maybe a couple months at the most, because it can get stuck on your paper. And the other thing is, you do not want to leave it in like a hot car or in a hot room, because that could also make the masking stick. So in the hard and soft edges techniques section, I just wet with some a spray bottle, and what you're trying to see here is that when the paint touches the water, it will leave a softer edge, and then on the other side of that shape it might be a harder edge. And it's good to have both hard and soft edges in your paintings. And another way to see this is to take some color and just put the color on, and then sort of like we did with the section up above where we did a graded wash, we're just going to put some water next to that, and that will end up with a softer edge on the one side and then harder edge on the other side. And so that might be a way that you can have something blend into something else, or look like it's lit by sunlight. The next technique, scratching wet and dry, is a way that you can do branches and things like that, and you really have to get your paint at the right consistency. It has to almost be dry for part of it, and to do the darker branches you can wait just a few seconds while it's still shiny. You want a tool that's got something you can scrape with, and I'm going to use a ruler that has sort of a rounded edge to it, and I can scrape into the paint that's still wet, and it will create dark lines while it's still wet, because the paint is sinking down into those scratched areas. And those are great for tree branches and things like that. And then in order to get the lighter lines, I have to wait for that area to dry a little bit more. So we will check back. So this has been part 2 of Watercolor Techniques for Beginners, and there's still part 3 and 4 to go, and hope you've enjoyed. Thanks. Bye.